Welcome to the latest episode of KapVista Klips. Today we are here with the team from Centrus Diagnostics. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Good. Thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. So I want to get into it straight away and I want to understand what you're trying to achieve and what you've built and what you're doing. But firstly, let's start with the team. So I'm going to pass it over to you. If you can give us a brief introduction and go into your background and your experience and how you got to this point, because that builds the excitement and the credibilities for our audience. So I'll hand it over to you. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. We'll
Perfect.
go left or right here. All right. Michael Burnham. I'm a cardiologist for more than 30 years and a serial entrepreneur. I've done several companies successfully based on my own inventions. I was nominated for an international prize in biochemistry years ago and didn't win. And as the story goes, my wife looked out and said, "Your picture's in the paper, but we don't have any furniture." So that's when I decided to become an entrepreneur. Um, Along the way, besides practicing cardiology and getting involved in diagnostics, I had the pleasure of meeting our co-founder, Srijad Chirla. And so the little piece of history that's behind Centrus is that the other company uses the external input of blood pressure to regulate a pacemaker. And so I was very interested in blood pressure, and blood pressure is the most important vital sign. Hypertension is the most important medical illness by far. And yet the technology is beyond archaic. It's a medieval torture device where you put something on your arm and it squeezes until it hurts. And then you get things that are kind of accurate, but not really. And maybe that's part of why half the people in the world who have hypertension are not under control, and many of them develop heart failure. Sri and I got to talking one day, and turned out we were both interested in wearables and cuffless blood pressure. But up to the time we met, all the big boys, the Apple, Samsung, Garmin's, everybody couldn't do it in a medically accurate way. And I'm going to make the bold claim that we did it. And what's more, we can prove that we did it. And Centrus was born from that. And I'll just, finish my introduction by, why I have a passion for this. And that is that, I've been prescribing and using medical wearables for decades. Where the medical wearables aren't new. I mean, in the old days, you strapped a monitor on somebody and they tried to sleep, either to measure their blood pressure, record their heartbeat. They were inconvenient, uncomfortable, but they were medically accurate, and I, as a physician, could take actions based on that and help people. And now we have hundreds of millions of people worldwide wearing wearables where they're making their own health decisions. And quite frankly, the stuff that's out there is utter nonsense. It's shocking, and it disturbs me greatly. Let me give you just two examples, and then I'll turn this over to Sri. One example is, during the COVID epidemic, everybody used the click the pulse oximeter on your finger and find out, what's your percentage of oxygen in your blood. And if it's under 90, you go in the hospital, and if it's over 90, you go home. Does anybody know in the fine print that it doesn't work on dark and brown people? That they were sending home people who were dark and brown right and left because the things don't give the right answer? That's something that's been known for a long time, and it's in the fine print. And I'll just give you another example, which brings us back to blood pressure. Recently, a state medical society in the United States reported that in the state of Colorado, 11% of all emergency room admissions now are because people are getting erroneous readings from their wearables that make them think that maybe they have high blood pressure and they go rushing off to the emergency room. And in reality, they don't. But there's probably an equal number of people who have hypertension who don't think they have it because their wearable says they don't have it. And they're being undertreated and ultimately develop, some of them, heart failure and die. So, this has got to stop. And the only way this can stop is to marry a comfortable wearable with medical grade accuracy. And so that's why Centrus was born, to do that. And when Shri and I got together, Shri, he can toot his own horn, but there's nobody in the world that knows more about mobile electronics and medical wearables, the guts of them, than he does. And when I met him, I realized he had already done this once in a different area of electrocardiography. So we put our ideas together, realized that we could do what Apple and the rest of them couldn't. And then we set out to prove it. And we did. So let me pass this over to Shri.
Right. Thanks, Michael. So I'm the bits and bytes guy. I'm not a doctor or physician. I have a bachelor's degree in electronics from the IIT Madras, one of the IITs in India. And then I got my master's in computer science from the University of California in Santa Barbara. And since then, like about 32 years now, I've been working in the field of mobile electronics, low power electronics, chips, and systems. And I kind of like to say that the field chose me. I didn't choose it, and it's just a natural thing for me. If you have touched a laptop or a smartphone or a smartwatch, anything on a battery in the last 30 years, you've used my work. There's no way around it. I have an Intel Achievement Award for when I was at Intel for some of the fundamental work I did. And a few years later, Intel invested in one of my startups, and that actually is the mathematical basis for a lot of the mobile systems that you see today. I also wrote a book on it with folks from ARM and Renesas. So my work is fundamental to the mobile field. And then I did a legacy project in 2009, and my life is interesting. I don't have a dull day. That's what I like to tell people. Because I've been a serial entrepreneur, educator, I'm an angel investor in some companies, and I keep my day full. But everything is centers around mobile electronics for me. And so in 2009, I went off and started out in the boonies, a digital university. Think of it, we still didn't have 4G, we had 3G signals at best. Very successful university teaching computer engineering. And a few years later, I sold that back to the IITs. Right, so I exited that. And during that course of setting up this digital university across India, it occurred to me that medical is the new mobile. That's why I trademarked of it. I did not know anything about cardiology or anything, but I knew a heart disease, the leading killer on the planet, and then the technology, especially mobile devices, could actually solve the problem in very effective ways. And the 10-year journey since 2015 to now is itself a fascinating story for another day. But I'll give you this, and that's what Michael was alluding to earlier. So we built a very small 160 gram device that goes head to head with any $30,000 ECG machine from a GE or a Philips, right? And can be used by practically anybody. If they could use an Android device in WhatsApp, they could use it. Could go into remote areas and transmit the EKG. And it's been a fascinating journey. I've partnered with Medtronic, Philips, Siemens, Abbott, and a whole lot of pharma companies and leading hospitals around the world in 18 different countries, including the US, to actually bring this technology. And about 1.2 million people served and immense number of lives saved. I'm pretty humbled by the impact that we've had. But I think that was what got started. We are on to something much bigger with blood pressure, because blood pressure is the gateway to a lot of heart disease, or all of heart disease, Michael would say, right? And it's a bigger problem. 1.3 billion people have it. It's also a harder problem, mathematically and physics-wise. It's a harder problem. But I'm fortunate to have basically a background in mobile systems, and my capstone project, all the way from my bachelor's degree, was signal processing. And I'm fortunate to have one of the best teams in signal processing working with me. So that's what led to where we are with Centrus.
Amazing, amazing. So the background that you both have is quite impressive. Now, it's like a perfect storm. You've come together. You've created something amazing. Tell us about that. Tell us about what you've created and what the milestones you've achieved so far.
So I'll tell you from the clinical side, and Shri can tell you from the technical side, the problems that we had to solve. So the issues with blood pressure done the conventional way with the cuff, most people don't realize this, but when you go to the doctor and they take your blood pressure, the first reading is usually off by, according to the literature, 18 to 25%, which is the difference between normal and hypertension. And the variability from measurement to measurement is quite high. So the gold standard, is a problem, which is something that you have to begin with. But the major issue is being able to take it often enough in an unsupervised way. So if you had the ability to take blood pressure frequently,
Hmm.
and it didn't depend on whether you male, female, white skin, dark skin, etc., this could change hypertension, because what we have to remember, blood pressure is just a number, but hypertension is just a state. And what people don't realize is that you can have a completely normal blood pressure at rest. Go to the doctor, it's 120 over 80, everybody is happy. But at night, when you go to sleep, if your blood pressure doesn't go down 10 to 15%, the nocturnal dip, you have hypertension.
Mm.
You can have completely normal blood pressure at rest and get out and exercise, and it goes up too high for the level of work. Even though at rest you have a normal blood pressure, you have hypertension. How you absorb your medication. Two people take the same drug, the same amount, and one of them is well treated and the other isn't, and the difference is because they absorb it differently. But who's taking their blood pressure? So there's a huge clinical problem here that the big boys out there, couldn't solve. So the goal is do something that doesn't constrict your arm, and everybody uses an optical method. And what you see is systematically a number of mistakes. Let me give you a couple, because like these two guys on this podcast claiming they can do what Apple can't do. I mean, give me a break. How could that be true? Well, the answer is that they're all making the same systematic mistakes. I'll give you two examples. People are running around wearing, rings, and I'm not mentioning any names on the podcast. But if you think about it, if and that's supposedly telling you what your body circulation and all this stuff is. When you go out into a cold environment, does your hand get cold? Yes. Does the inside of your body get cold? No. So that tells you right away that using your finger to measure blood pressure or to measure physiologic changes is nonsense. We already talked about the fact that, skin color can make a very big difference in anything that's optical. And the other thing is when you put an optical device on your wrist, which is the way all of these things work, including ours, you can get something that goes up and down with the pulse. And because the clarity of this signal is so bad, what all the big boys do is they try to make all the pulses look the same. They average them in order to get one useful signal, which they have to collect maybe for a half an hour to take one reading. That's not useful. And the reason is in different physiologic situations, the signal changes. And if you're unable to see that, you always get the same answer. And you can never track the physiologic changes that go on. So in order to do this right, you have to be able to do it often enough. In our case, we can do it every 10 seconds, not every half hour. And you have to do it with enough clarity that you can see the differences. One of the things that struck me when I first saw the technology, that the signal processing capability that Sri was able to come up with, it blew my mind, because I had been researching the Apples and the Garmins and everybody else, and they have their nice sine wave thing going up and down. And Sri was playing with a device that has such clarity. You can see the aortic valve closing. Never mind, it's not a sine wave. And I realized as a physiologist, which has basically been my medical life, that as a cardiologist, you can do a lot of things with a signal like that, including seeing the difference when people are older versus younger, when they have disease and whether they don't have disease. And that would absolutely change your ability. Plus, to measure blood pressure accurately. But in addition to that, besides age progression and disease progression, you could do it fast enough that it would be completely relevant. So we have the technology to do that. So if you kind of look at the hierarchy of why, from a commercial standpoint, is this Centrus de-risked? Okay, what makes us different? One is you have Shri who's done this before, and I've done some of this myself. But you have Shri, we have the technology, but in addition to that, we have the proof. And I will just tell you one more thing and then turn it over to Shri to talk more about the technology. So the FDA has a set, US FDA has a set of criteria which are very rigid in order for one of these things to work, a cuffless device. It has to have certain attributes in terms of working at different ages, different skin tones, hypertension versus normal, all of these things you have to do, where you have to do it in 88 patients over a month. And they require you to calibrate it. So you can't just let it run continuously. You have to show that it doesn't drift. Okay. So we did that already, but we did it in a foreign country. We went to India where we could afford to do it as a startup. And the FDA requires 88 patients. We did it in 360 patients. The FDA says you need to do it up to the age of 59. We did it up to the age of 76. And we got data that is equal to or better than what the FDA demands. So not only have we done, particularly in Shri's case, done this before, and we have the technology to sample, to do something every 10 seconds that nobody else can do in a half an hour, but we've already done the dress rehearsal and proved that we can do it.
Yeah.
So we're sitting in a pretty good place, but what's missing here is it costs a heck of a lot of money to go through the FDA. And, so that's why we're here, trying to get the resources to do again for the FDA what we already did in India.
Yeah.
Shri, why don't you describe what makes it?
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit of color to it. Michael mostly covered it. But I'm going to translate what Michael said into more of an engineering or a technological challenge, which is what the bar that anybody that wants to develop a device like this has to overcome. And that's been a difficult thing. It doesn't matter how much money you can throw at it. So fundamentally, let me take my skin here, my hand here, darker than both of you guys. And there are people who are even darker skin tone than me. So across our skin tones, and there are 7 different ones the FDA defines, it's got to work, right? And now we have some people with thin hands, some people with thick hands, and some sweaty. And maybe somebody got a tan, and somebody got some exercise-based sweat or a moisture on there. So the number of conditions that come at you are phenomenal. And so from an engineering point of view, you have a really wide design space. And that's been a challenge for a lot of the basic smartwatches, and also the high-end versions like Garmin and Polar and Whoop. It's been a challenge for them also. And then when you get to this and your hand is, you have to be sensitive to motion, position, and things like that. So we also actually designed such that, hey, because the blood pressure changes whether I raise my hand like this or drop it down. So to be sensitive, we've actually built a bunch of engineering into that. And again, during it, like Michael said, it doesn't necessarily have to be young people, young and healthy adults. I'm hypertensive, so my blood pressure waveforms are very different from somebody who's not. And somebody with stage 2 hypertension is going to show very different waveforms. Somebody with heart failure is going to show very different. So, and most of the devices in the market actually haven't been able. They have a one-size-fits-all algorithm. Whereas we built like a next generation class of models and algorithms that actually deal with the wide variety of physiological conditions and medication impact that could come at it. Last but not least is being able to do all this without burning the battery or the device. A huge number of medical devices actually just overheat. You will see a whole bunch of recalls, but then that happens to be my area of expertise, architecting battery-operated devices. So that's been another challenge that we have overcome. And that's one of the reasons why we can do this real time. As the signal is coming, we can tell the user, hey, I'm getting a good signal or a bad one, stabilize or something. So that's actually been like just one fundamental engineering breakthrough that we've had. And I'll also expand on what happens after the clinical trial that Michael mentioned. I mean, that's just one astounding clinical trial for us. But we are now able to go get what is like a bit of a fast track approval in India regulatorily, and then I can immediately leverage the huge telecardiology network that we built, right? A and B, that gives us a super degree of confidence that we will pass the FDA criteria done by. I mean, the testing in the US has to be done by a third party lab. So, and we know now that we have greater than 99% confidence that the third party trial testing in the US will be successful. So that's where it goes from here.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. So, what does the next 12 to 18 months look like for you?
Well, we're after raising the money,
Yeah,
we're laser focused on doing really one thing, and that's getting through the FDA. And once we're through the FDA, then I think our business model becomes clear. We have a motto that the world doesn't need another smartwatch, it needs a smarter watch. We are a software company. We actually have, 5 other technologies different than blood pressure that we're not going to talk about today. So there's plenty of other things we want to do after this, and we view this as a platform. But the best analogy to what we intend to be when we have the credibility of having the FDA 510K, which opens up both the commercial and the medical markets, because we'll be able to say we're the only blood pressure device you can put on your wrist, that you can take your measurement every 10 seconds and it's as good as what they do in the doctor's office or better. But if you think about it, all the devices everybody wears have GPS in them. That makes them work in some ways, many ways. Does anybody know the name of the company that licenses the GPS module to everybody? That's Centrus Diagnostics. You don't need to know our name. Maybe we'll be the Centrus inside. It doesn't matter. We can make Apple better. We can make Garmin better. Name it. That's our business model. We don't want to manufacture anything. As a matter of fact, we have call it an MOU with the largest watch company in the world, Timex, right now, that wants to be an OEM partner and manufacture one of the devices. This is all non-exclusive. Our goal is to make everybody else medical grade so that the nonsense that's going on out there now stops.
yeah, okay. And then going to the raise, how much are you raising, and what's the use of funds besides the FDA approval?
We're trying to raise $3 million on a convertible note basis. The money is to keep the company running and get through the FDA. The trial is very expensive in the US. That's going to use up most of the money. We have other things we can talk about as well. We have a series of artificial intelligence-based physiologic apps that run with the same blood pressure algorithm that do amazing things. Those are ready to license. We have the ability, we've already done the clinical trial in India. All we have to do is file the paperwork to get approval there. Shri has, over 1 million patient telecardiology network that could use this device. So the use of proceeds are primarily to get the FDA 510K, but also to license and pursue these other things. We're not going to start any other products. That's the goal.
Okay, amazing, amazing. So I'm not going to take up too much more of your time, but it's been great. It's been great going through this. What I'm understanding here is that you have built a software platform that can be licensed to every other wearable device on the planet. It is a lot more accurate than what is currently in the market. It is designed for the majority of the global population because, like you're saying, they're different skin tones and things like that. That's, currently the devices that are in the market and the software that's in the market is not catered to that, whereas yours is. And you have a massive opportunity because this is a global issue. It's not just North America. This is a global issue, which means your target market is massive. Wearable devices are a normal thing. People are dependent on them these days. So, rolling out what you have built into that market, you're not trying to create new market. You're trying to improve it.
That's correct.
Sri, why don't you have the final
Yeah,
word?
that's correct. And I think, Daniel, you touched upon something very interesting there. First of all, I couldn't have said it better. But I think, the GPS analogy is very apt here. Just like GPS and front-facing camera were introduced in smartphones, and the applications, like nobody thought DoorDash would happen or Uber or something would happen, right? People didn't connect that to GPS. When blood pressure comes into smartwatches, I think the number of applications that come upon that, and not just for people who are ill and who are hypertensive or anything. I think also people who are exercising, people who are running marathons, you're going to see a whole lot of applications out of that signal that just boggles the imagination right now. I think that's what we are on the verge of right now, and that's what keeps me very excited. And I know I've shown this device to a whole bunch of people, both on the wellness side and the illness side, and everybody just thinks of an application that they could do with it. And that's what I think will make Centrus a great company with a phenomenal amount of impact, not only globally, but in a number of healthcare applications that it will apply to.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Okay, thank you very much for jumping on. It's been great to chat. Anybody who's watching this episode who wants to find out more, please reach out to me, and my team can connect you straight through to the Centrus Diagnostics guys.